She stood barefoot in the snow, 19, fragile, and sold off like a secret nobody wanted to carry any longer. He was a single dad, worn down in quiet, invisible ways, clinging only to a kind heart and the last $147 he had. When their paths crossed in the bitter cold, neither of them could have imagined they'd become each other's last hope and their most unexpected salvation. Before we dive into this powerful story of love, endurance, and second chances, if narratives like this stir something in you, consider subscribing. That one simple gesture helps voices like these find the people who need to hear them most. Now, let me tell you how it really happened. The pine trees moaned under the wind's icy breath, casting long, restless shadows that danced across the frozen dirt road like memories no one wanted to revisit. Eli Whitaker gripped the steering wheel of his beat-up Chevy tighter as the road narrowed, drawing him deeper into the Montana wilderness. He hadn't planned on coming this way, hadn't even intended to stop in this part of the state. But then he saw the sign, scrawled in angry red spray paint. Live auction, 3 p.m. cash only. Something about it tugged at a place inside him he didn't fully understand. Something buried. Something raw. All he had was $147 in his wallet, just enough to cover gas for the ride home, a few groceries, and the refill for Ruby's inhaler due next week. But here he was, spending it on a detour to nowhere. The clearing appeared out of nowhere. 6 or so trucks were scattered carelessly around a makeshift bonfire. Men with unshaven faces and hollowed-out eyes clustered near a ramshackle platform, just some busted pallets hammered together. No one looked happy. The air was thick with gasoline, cheap liquor, and something even darker. Eli didn't want a name. He already hated being there. A tall man in a torn trench coat stood center stage, his voice full of smoke and gravel. 19. Healthy enough. She works. Doesn't eat much. The girl was shoved forward like she was nothing more than stock. Eli's breath caught. She was barefoot in the snow. Her tangled dark hair fell well past her shoulders. Her jeans were ripped clean through at the knees. But it wasn't how she looked that hit him. It was her eyes, wary, distant, like she'd already learned the hard way that no one was coming to save her. Like hope belonged to someone else. "This ain't no charity," the man barked as murmurs rolled through the crowd. "You want her? You pay. Or move along." Someone nearby snorted. "Looks like she's already seen hell. No fool here's wasting $1 on that." She flinched at the sound, but didn't cry. Eli couldn't look away. He thought of Ruby. Thought of how tiny she looked that winter, curled up on the couch, lips tinged blue, barely breathing when the ambulance finally came. Thought of how it felt to be helpless. "I'll take her," he said. The sound of his own voice startled him. Laughter rippled through the group. The auctioneer squinted. "You serious, old man?" Eli stepped forward, pulling his worn wallet from his coat. "I've got $147. Cash," the man spat. "You're short." Eli didn't say a word. He just held the bills out. After a pause that felt like a dare, the man shrugged. "Fine. She's yours. No returns." The girl finally looked up slowly. Her lips parted just enough, as if she wanted to ask something but didn't dare let it out. Eli didn't extend a hand. He just nodded toward his truck. She followed. The ride back was quiet. Eli said nothing. The girl didn't ask anything. She sat hunched in the seat, arms wrapped tight around herself, her fingertips tinged with cold. He turned up the heater. She didn't seem to notice. He glanced over. "What's your name?" Her voice was raspy and faint. "Lena." "I'm Eli. My daughter's Ruby. She's 7. Lena didn't respond. Eli pulled up to his small cabin tucked deep beneath the trees. Smoke curled up from the chimney. The porch light blinked dimly in the early dark. Inside, the warmth wrapped around them like an old, worn-in blanket. Framed pictures hung on the walls, Ruby's messy kindergarten handprint, an old wedding photo fading at the edges. "I'll get you a blanket," Eli said, disappearing down the hallway. Lena stayed frozen in the doorway, eyes sweeping the room like she wasn't sure it would still be there if she blinked. He came back holding a faded quilt. She took it but didn't wrap herself in it. She just stared at him. "Why?" she whispered. Eli didn't pretend he didn't know what she meant. "Because no one else was going to," he said. "And I couldn't walk away." He didn't wait for gratitude. Just motioned toward the couch. "You can sleep here tonight." Lena sank down slowly, keeping the blanket folded in her lap. Eli turned off the hallway light, leaving only the soft glow of the lamp by the fireplace. As he was turning to go, he heard her voice again, barely a whisper. "No one's ever done something like that. Not for me." Eli paused. "Then get some rest, Lena. You're safe now." He walked away. But neither of them slept much. "You don't owe me a thing." Lena's body tensed. Eli raised a hand in reassurance. "I know how this might look from the outside. But that's not what's happening here. I didn't bring you in for anything other than the fact that you needed someone. That's all." Lena's gaze narrowed as if trying to read the truth in his face. "You don't even know who I am." "That's true," Eli said quietly. "But I've seen pain. And that's enough for me." A pause stretched between them, tense and delicate. Then Lena did something she hadn't done in longer than she could remember. She sat. Really sat. Not like someone ready to bolt. Not like someone waiting to defend herself. Just sat. Eli turned back to the stove without another word, giving her space. That afternoon, the cabin eased into a kind of rhythm. Lena didn't speak much, slipping through the house like a shadow. But she picked up a broom without being asked and swept the living room. She fed the dog, an aging golden retriever named Boomer, who, without hesitation, claimed her as his own. She even discovered a plastic bin in the laundry room labeled giveaway and pulled out a worn sweatshirt. It smelled faintly of vanilla and wood smoke, like memory. When the school bus arrived, Lena stiffened instinctively. Seconds later, the front door burst open and Ruby came flying in, her backpack bouncing with every step. She was small, energetic, her eyes full of curiosity and questions. She stopped in her tracks the moment she saw Lena. "Hi." Lena gave a small nod. "I'm Ruby. Are you gonna live with us now?" Eli stepped inside behind her. "Ruby," he reminded gently, "what did we talk about?" "Kindness first," she recited with a serious nod. Then she turned back to Lena. "Do you like peanut butter? 'Cause I've got some." Lena blinked, caught completely off guard. Yeah. Sure." Ruby grinned. "Then we can be friends." Just like that. That evening, as the sun dipped below the tree line and soft snow drifted down, Lena stood by the window watching the forest quietly. "Your neighbors," she said suddenly. "Are they going to be a problem?" Eli sat across the room, oiling a squeaky hinge from one of the kitchen drawers. "Most likely. Small towns don't change quick," she said flatly. "They don't forgive easy. Or understand much outside their bubble." She turned slightly. "They think you bought me." Eli looked at her. "I did." Her head snapped around in surprise. But he added quickly, "Not the way they're imagining. I bought your freedom. That's it. You don't owe me your past or your trust or anything at all. Just take whatever time you need." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I've got nothing left to give." Eli stood, walked over slowly, and handed her the newly fixed hinge. Then let's start here. Help me fix a drawer. She stared at the piece in his hand. Then, gradually, almost like her limbs didn't trust her, she reached out and took it. It was something small, but in truth it was the start of everything. The snow had stopped, but a heavy chill still clung to the streets of Marlow Ridge like a second skin nobody dared shake off. The kind of town where everybody claimed to know everybody else, whether they did or not. Where folks sat in the same pews every Sunday, drank from the same chipped mugs every morning at the diner, and gossiped through fences like it was a civic duty. And absolutely nothing went unnoticed. So when a haunted-eyed 19-year-old girl moved into Eli Whitaker's cabin, it didn't take long for whispers to start. At the feed store. Heard he picked her up at some auction in the sticks. Paid cash. Don't shock me none. That man's been off since his wife passed. At the post office. She don't look right. Doesn't even meet your eye. He's got a kid in that house. What's he thinking? The rumors slithered through the town like frost through floorboards until they reached the kitchen of Evelyn Harper. Sunday school teacher, part-time moral compass, and Eli's closest neighbor. She had known his late wife, Emma. Had cried real tears at her funeral. Had dropped off pies that first winter when Ruby was still in diapers. So when the gossip reached her, she didn't waste time. She showed up on Eli's porch the next morning with a pie in one hand and judgment in her eyes. Eli opened the door still in his boots. One look at her face and he sighed. "Morning, Evelyn. You've always been a decent man," she said, stepping past him without being invited. But even good men lose their way when grief clouds the road. He shut the door behind her. "Coffee?" She set the pie down hard. "No, thank you. I didn't come to be soothed." From the hallway, Lena emerged just enough to be seen. Her eyes met Evelyn's. Then faltered. "That her?" Evelyn asked, no whisper in her voice. "Lena," Eli said gently, "this is Ms. Harper. A neighbor." Lena gave the smallest nod, then disappeared again like smoke. Evelyn folded her arms. "She looks like she's walked through war." "She has," Eli replied with quiet certainty. "You've got a child here," Evelyn pressed. "Bringing in someone with no history, no family, it's reckless." He met her stare without blinking. "Ruby adores her. Children don't know better." "She does," Eli said firmly. "She sees clearer than most adults I know." Evelyn exhaled sharply. "People are talking." "I know," he said, pouring himself a coffee and leaning against the counter. "But I didn't ask anyone's permission. I did what I felt was right, and I'd do it again." For a moment, the stern lines on Evelyn's face softened. She looked toward the hallway where Lena had vanished. "I hope you're right," she said, "because the whole town's watching." At school, Ruby felt it too. She'd always been the quiet one, the kid with second-hand coats and peanut butter lunches. But now people watched her. Girls whispered behind cupped hands. Boys snickered. At lunch, one leaned over his tray and smirked. "Hey, Ruby, is it true your dad bought a girlfriend off Craigslist?" She didn't get the full joke, but she understood it was meant to sting. That afternoon, she stormed through the front door without a word. Straight past Boomer, past the kitchen, and into her father's arms. "They're being mean," she mumbled into his chest. "They said awful things about her." Lena stood still near the stove, a dish rag frozen in her hands. Eli stroked Ruby's hair gently. "What kind of things?" "They said she was dangerous. That you paid for her. Like she wasn't even a person, just something bought." Eli looked up for the first time since Lena had arrived, locking eyes with her across the room. She looked down, a flicker of shame crossing her face. He turned back to Ruby. "Do you know why we help people, sweetheart?" Ruby gave a quiet nod. Because it's the right thing to do. Even if no one else will. Even when they twist it into something ugly. Ruby pulled back slightly, sniffling. Then she looked over at Lena, hesitant. You're not gonna leave, are you? Lena shook her head gently. Not unless you ask me to. Ruby reached out with her small hand and took hold of Lena's. Good. I don't want you to go. Later that evening, Eli found Lena sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in the old quilt, her breath rising in soft clouds against the cold. The pine trees were dusted with snow, looking like they'd been sifted with powdered sugar. You doing okay? He asked from the doorway. She didn't respond right away. I've had people talk about me before, but not like this. Not from people who matter. They don't matter, Eli said. Lena turned to him. They matter to you. He came and sat beside her. They're not the ones raising my little girl. Silence settled between them, quiet and thick. Then she said, I never asked you to save me. I know, he replied. But you did anyway. He looked at her. And I'd do it all over again tomorrow if it came to that. Lena swallowed hard. Do you ever regret it? Eli leaned back, resting on his elbows. No, but I do wish I'd gotten there sooner. She turned her head away, voice barely audible. They tied my hands before shoving me on that platform. Eli didn't move. He just listened. They said no one would want me. That if I ran, no one would come looking. His jaw tightened. They were almost right, she murmured. Eli turned toward her, voice calm but firm. Almost doesn't count. She blinked, and a single tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. For once, she let it fall. The next morning began wrapped in frost and stillness. The kind of quiet that follows a long, hard cry, the kind that settles deep. Lena hadn't said much since that night on the porch. But she moved with more certainty now, still cautious, but no longer a ghost floating through someone else's life. Something inside her had shifted. Not how the town looked at her. Not yet. But how she looked at herself. She was still bruised. Still healing. But she wasn't invisible anymore. Inside, the wood stove popped softly in the background. Eli sat at the kitchen table, hunched over a stack of bills, rubbing the back of his neck with a weary hand. Across from him, Lena stirred a pot of oatmeal with slow, deliberate care. Boomer snoozed at her feet, tail twitching in his dreams. Ruby sat at the counter, tongue poking out in concentration as she colored a picture of a treehouse. How's that masterpiece coming along? Lena asked with a small smile. Ruby beamed. It's gonna have rope ladders and snacks hidden in the floorboards. Just in case. Lena laughed softly. Sounds like the ultimate survival setup. Daddy says you know all about survival stuff, Ruby added. Is it true? Eli looked up, brows knit in concern. But Lena just shrugged. I guess I've learned a thing or two. Can you teach me? Lena hesitated, glancing over at Eli. He met her eyes and gave her a single nod. That was all it took. Sure, kid, she said gently. Let's start with knots. That afternoon, Lena took Ruby out to the shed behind the cabin. The air was brisk, but the sun had done just enough to soften the snow into a crunchy blanket. She pulled an old coil of rope from a shelf, a rough and weathered, but still strong. Knots? Ruby asked excitedly. Knots, Lena corrected with a smile. And here's the first rule, knots aren't just about holding things together. Sometimes they're how you let go when you need to. Ruby squinted. That doesn't really make sense. It will, Lena said, her smile faint but real. They sat side by side on a log, their legs swinging back and forth in sync. Lena showed her how to tie a square knot, then a bowline, and finally a slip knot. Ruby struggled at first, got frustrated. then giggled when Lena started tying her own boot laces to demonstrate. "You're really good at this," Ruby said suddenly. Lena blinked. "At tying knots?" "No. At being nice." It was such a simple thing, but it hit Lena hard. Kindness had been a forgotten skill, one she hadn't practiced in a long, long time. She'd almost believed she didn't have it anymore. But this little girl, she wasn't judging, just noticing. "Thanks," Lena said, wiping her hands on her jeans. "You're not so bad yourself." That evening, Eli leaned on the porch railing, watching Lena and Ruby by the fire pit. Lena was roasting marshmallows, Ruby laughing beside her. The kind of laughter that made your ribs ache and your heart swell. It had been a long time since he'd heard his daughter laugh like that. Too long. But even as the warmth of that moment settled around him, Eli noticed the way Lena moved. Carefully, like someone still waiting for the world to snap. He stepped down with 2 mugs of hot cocoa in hand. "Is that one for me?" Lena asked, clearly surprised. "Unless you think Ruby needs both." "I definitely do," Ruby grinned, grabbing hers eagerly. They sat in easy silence for a while, stars overhead, the fire crackling steadily. "You're really good with her," Eli said softly. Lena gave a slight shrug. "She's easy to love." "You don't think you are?" Lena didn't respond right away. Her gaze dropped into the firelight. "I wasn't raised to be. I was raised to survive." Eli placed his mug down gently. "There's a big difference." She nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "I know. That's what makes this so strange, to feel safe. To just sit in the warmth and not wait for it all to fall apart." He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Lena turned to him quietly. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything," Eli replied. "Why did you really bring me back with you?" He met her gaze and didn't look away. "Because when I saw you, I saw someone who'd already been let down too many times." He paused. "And because Ruby doesn't need flawless. She needs real. A home that has room for people who are still trying." Lena swallowed hard. Her throat tightened. "I'm not great at being someone's anything." Eli's voice was low but certain. "You're here. That's enough for right now." The next morning brought back the frost, thicker and meaner this time. Lena was yanked from sleep by the sharp, wet sound of coughing echoing from down the hall. Heart racing, she jumped up and raced to Ruby's room. Eli was already there, kneeling beside the bed, holding Ruby upright as she gasped for air, her face pale, sweat beading along her hairline. "Her inhaler's empty," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, though panic flickered beneath it. "I was going to pick up a refill tomorrow. I didn't think." "We need steam." Now, Lena interrupted, already moving. She bolted into the kitchen, filled a pot with water, lit the stove, grabbed towels. She'd done this before too many times. For cousins. For strangers. For herself. She poured the boiling water into a bowl, draped a towel over Ruby's head, and held her steady as Eli hovered behind, trying not to fall apart. "Breathe slowly, baby," Lena murmured, voice calm. "You're okay. You're safe. You're strong." Ruby wheezed and then inhaled. A little deeper. And deeper still. Eli's eyes shimmered. "How did you know what to do?" Lena didn't lift her head. "Because once, no one else did." Finally, Ruby's breath evened out. Her small body slumped into her father's arms, exhausted but safe. Lena sank back, her hands trembling. Eli looked at her like something had changed in that moment, like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. "You saved her," he said, almost in awe. Lena stared down at her hands. "She saved me first." Winter had a way of wrapping itself around Marlowe Ridge like a second skin, quiet, steady, impossible to shake. But inside the cabin on the hill, something warmer was starting to settle in. That morning, Lena stood at the stove, gently humming as she cracked eggs into a cast iron skillet. The melody was off-key and unrecognizable, but it floated through the room like sunlight after a long storm. Boomer lay on the floor nearby, thumping his tail with every movement she made. Ruby, wrapped in a flannel blanket, sat at the table, drawing stick figures with crooked smiles beneath a bright yellow sun. "That me?" Lena asked, glancing at the paper. Ruby nodded. "That's you. And that's Daddy. And that's me. We're making pancakes." Lena gave her a genuine smile, one that reached her eyes. "I can't draw worth anything, but I can flip a mean pancake." "You're really good at mornings," Ruby declared proudly. "My mom was too. Daddy says you never forget a good morning." Lena's smile faltered for a second, just a flicker of something deeper. But she caught it, masked it the way she'd trained herself to do. By midday, the cabin smelled like cinnamon and syrup and something else, too, belonging. Not forced, not fragile, just real. Eli came back early from hauling wood. He paused in the doorway, taking it all in. His daughter still in pajamas, Lena humming softly as she worked, and Boomer sprawled on his back, paws in the air. "You redecorate while I was gone?" he asked, amused. "Just gave it a fresh label," Lena replied, flipping a pancake with flair. "Rebranded. I like it." He meant more than the decor. She knew it. That afternoon, while Lena folded laundry and Ruby played outside, her boots clunky with snow and a sled that barely worked, Eli made the long walk down the gravel drive to check the mail. Most of it was junk, ads, a bill or two. But tucked among them was a plain white envelope with no name and no return address. He opened it on the walk back. Inside was a single piece of lined notebook paper, creased sharply and written in ink so heavy it had nearly torn the page. "You can drag a stray off the street, but it's still a stray. Some creatures don't belong in homes. She's not one of us. The town's watching. So are we. No name, no kindness, just venom." Eli stood still, letting the cold bite his skin. Then he folded the letter neatly, tucked it into his back pocket, and kept walking. That night, he didn't bring up the letter, didn't mention it to Ruby, and especially not to Lena. Instead, he moved quietly around the house, checking the locks again, testing the motion lights on the porch. Lena noticed. She noticed the way his eyes flicked toward the driveway more often than usual, how his jaw never quite unclenched. Later, after Ruby was safely tucked in with her usual ritual, 2 hugs, 3 kisses, 1 whispered wish, Lena stepped outside and found Eli standing on the porch, his hands buried in his coat pockets, his stare locked on the dark woods beyond. "Mailman come today?" she asked. His breath fogged the air. "Yeah." "Was it about me?" He turned to her. He didn't lie. "Yeah." She nodded, unsurprised. "They're not wrong." He frowned. "Don't say that. It's what I've been told all my life." "Then they've all been wrong," he said, voice firm. Lena leaned on the railing beside him, arms folded. "I used to think people like that held real power, like their words decided who I was allowed to be. They're just afraid of anything they don't understand," he said. She let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "Yeah, I've had years to get used to that." "Don't," Eli said softly. Not here. Not in this house. This place wasn't built on fear. She turned toward him and looked, really looked. You built it with someone else, she said. Your wife. He nodded slowly. Emma. We bought this land after Ruby was born. She wanted quiet, a garden, chickens. Said the city didn't have enough stars. Lena let the silence stretch between them, warm and unhurried. She died 5 years ago, Eli continued, voice low and even. Car accident. Ice storm. I wasn't with her. The grief in his tone had lost its sharp edges. Scarred over, but still there. I'm sorry, Lena whispered. Eli looked at her gently. She would have liked you. Lena blinked, startled. Why? Emma had a sixth sense, Eli said quietly. She could spot someone who'd been through fire and kept walking. It was like a radar for the quietly strong. Lena didn't know how to respond, so she didn't. She just sat in the stillness between them. After a pause, Eli reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the letter. Without a word, he handed it to her. Lena unfolded it, read every word, and then, without hesitating, tore it straight down the middle. Then again, and again, until the pieces were too small to read. Until the poison vanished completely into scraps. I'm not leaving, she said firmly. I never asked you to, Eli replied. I just needed to say it out loud. For me, it had been the kind of morning you don't forget. Sunlight poured across the cabin floor in golden streaks. Boomer snored softly by the fire, and Ruby sat in the center of the room, braiding yarn into little bracelets like she was stitching magic into each strand. Eli, still recovering, lounged on the couch with his cast propped up, muttering playfully about feeling useless. And Lena, apron dusted with flour, was baking muffins, moving with ease, with purpose. The house didn't just look like a home. It breathed like one. Then 3 firm knocks at the door. Not frantic, not shy, just certain. Boomer sat up, suddenly alert. Lena wiped her hands on a dish towel and opened the door. On the porch stood a tall man, lean, sharp-eyed, with a glint that felt more like ownership than recognition. His coat was too crisp for someone local. His boots gleamed. Next to him stood a woman, gaunt, weary, smoking a cigarette like she couldn't breathe without it. Lena froze. The woman exhaled smoke slowly. Hi, sweetheart. Lena's breath caught. Mom, she whispered. The man stepped forward. We're here for our daughter. Eli appeared behind her in the doorway, his voice calm but firm. You need to leave. She's still a minor, the man said. We're her legal guardians. And you've been hiding her. She's 19, Eli replied. And she's not property. She's free. She's got no documents, the woman cut in. No ID. No birth certificate. And we've got folks who saw you hand over cash for her. That's trafficking, buddy. We can make a whole mess out of this. Lena couldn't move. She felt rooted to the boards beneath her feet. The man took another step, his voice oily. Or we keep it simple. Pay what she owes us and we walk. No trouble. Eli stepped forward, closing the door behind him as he came out onto the porch. You don't speak for her anymore, he said. You gave up that right the second you put her on a crate and slapped a price on her. You don't want a legal fight, the man warned. Guys like you don't win those. Eli's voice dropped. Guys like me. You mean the ones who stand between predators and the people they prey on? The man's jaw ticked. You'll be hearing from a lawyer. Eli took another step, crutch firm, eyes hard. You'll never get near her again. The man wavered, then sneered. We'll see what the courts say. He turned and walked away. The woman lingered for a moment longer. Her eyes flickered, regret? Shame? It was hard to tell. Then she followed. Inside, Lena stood frozen. Her fists clenched tight. Her face pale. I'm sorry, Eli said gently. I didn't want to. They're going to bring everything back up, she said flatly. Everything. Then we fight, he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She stared at him, stunned. You'd really do that? Already am. The days that followed blurred together, phone calls, paperwork, meetings. Eli reached out to someone he trusted, Grace Ford, a seasoned family lawyer from Bozeman. Years ago, he'd pulled her out of a forest fire. Now, she showed up with muddy boots and zero patience for nonsense. No birth certificate, she asked. Lena shook her head. They never filed one. I don't even know my real birthday. They always told people I was younger to keep control. Grace didn't blink. It's ugly, but it's also beatable. She gave Lena a steady look. And you've got something stronger than paperwork. Lena raised an eyebrow. Like what? The truth. And people who won't let you stand alone. A hearing was scheduled. Emergency protection orders were filed. The town, still quietly buzzing about the blizzard rescue, rallied behind Lena in ways that spoke louder than words. Evelyn Harper offered to testify. Ruby's teacher submitted a glowing letter. Ben, the mailman who had delivered the bad news about Eli's injury, signed a statement describing Lena's bravery in the storm. Even so, Lena barely slept. Night after night, she lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, bracing for the fragile piece she'd found to shatter. And every night, Eli passed by, moving slow on his crutches, offering her a blanket, a quiet smile, and a reminder that always hit a little deeper. You're not alone anymore. The courtroom was small and cold 2 towns over, with walls the color of old paper. Lena sat beside Grace, palms damp, heart pounding like a war drum. Across from them, her biological parents whispered and glared. Their lawyer looked slick and polished, shiny shoes, hollow eyes. The judge, a silver-haired woman with the kind of stare that could split stone, called the room to order. Lena took the oath. And then she spoke. She talked about growing up in a house where hunger was a constant and cruelty was a given, where names were never used, only commands, slurs, and threats. She told them about being treated like a burden, about being traded for drug debts, and the day she stood barefoot on a crate, told to smile as strangers decided her worth. I didn't run, she said, voice steady, because I didn't believe there was anything better. I thought that was just life. She looked over at Eli. And then someone saw me. He didn't ask where I'd come from, didn't need to know what I'd done. He just let me sit down, let me be human. Her voice wavered, but she held on. He didn't save me with money. He saved me with dignity. And his daughter. She showed me what love looks like when it doesn't have a price. Her throat tightened. Her words cracked just slightly. I don't want to be their daughter anymore. I want to be his. The room went silent. Even the lawyer on the other side looked shaken. Even the defense attorney looked rattled. The judge leaned back in her seat, her face unreadable. And then she spoke. I've listened to many heartbreaking cases. I've seen my share of unfit parents. She paused, her voice unwavering. But rarely do I witness someone who has survived so much speak with the grace and clarity you just did. She turned her gaze toward Lena's parents. You didn't just lose your rights through paperwork. You forfeited them the moment you sold her. Actions speak louder than any statute. Then the judge looked back at Lena, and her voice softened. You're free now, and you're exactly where you're meant to be. When they walked out of the courthouse into the pale winter light, Eli held out his hand. Lena didn't take it. Instead, she wrapped her arms around him, tight and wordless, like she was finally sure the ground beneath her was real. Lena had never had a birthday, not a real one. There were no candles, no cake, not even a date she could claim as her own. Her parents could never remember the month she was born. One year her mother told a neighbor it was August. The next she said February. There had never been celebration, only silence. Or worse, a slammed door, a cigarette burn, an ashtray thrown too close. All her life, her beginning had been treated like a mistake. But now she stood in Eli Whitaker's kitchen. Streamers made from yarn hung across the room. Construction paper banners with uneven lettering taped to the cabinets. One of them, glitter glued by Ruby's careful hands, read, "Happy You Day, Callie." Lena laughed the moment she saw it, then wiped her eyes when tears followed. Just a few, but they were real. The morning had started with cinnamon rolls and coffee delivered by Ruby with the formality of a palace butler. Lena had tried to protest. "I didn't ask for this." Ruby had simply pressed a finger to her lips and whispered, "You didn't have to." Eli, still favoring his leg, had stayed up late the night before baking a lemon cake from a recipe passed down by his late wife. "It was Emma's favorite," he said, placing it gently on the table. "She'd want you to have it too." Lena nodded, that familiar lump rising again in her throat. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say a word," Eli replied softly. "Just enjoy the day." By midday, neighbors began showing up. Evelyn Harper brought a mason jar of fresh flowers and a card lined with pressed leaves. Ben Whitlow arrived with a small birdhouse, hand-carved, and awkwardly muttered, "You earned this." Even the mailman's shy grandson came, clutching a folded piece of paper. On it, he'd drawn Lena in a superhero cape, standing between Ruby and Eli. "This is you," he said bashfully, "because you save people." Lena knelt and hugged him. "Thank you," she whispered. "That might be the best gift I've ever received." That evening, they gathered around the fire pit despite the chill in the air. Ruby wore a crown of twigs and declared herself the birthday fairy. Boomer darted through the yard, chasing sticks like he was half his age. Eli sat beside Lena, quiet and steady. His eyes reflected the flames, watchful and warm. She leaned in, voice low. "I keep thinking this can't be real. Like someone's going to wake me up and tell me none of this belongs to me." Eli turned to her, voice steady. "No one's waking you up, Lena. This is yours. You're not just here, you belong." She blinked quickly, trying to hold it in. Just then, Ruby ran over with a tiny box wrapped in newspaper and tied with string. "Open it," she said excitedly. It's from Daddy. Lena hesitated, looking at Eli. He gave her a gentle nod. Go ahead. She unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a wooden ring box, weathered at the corners, the velvet inside worn smooth. When she opened it, her breath caught. A ring rested inside, no diamond, nothing flashy. Just a slim silver band with a braided inlay and a single stone the color of faded sky, somewhere between blue and green. It was Emma's, Eli said softly, but it never felt like hers alone. He paused, steadying himself. She told me once, if anything ever happened to her and I found someone who brought this home back to life, I'd know. Lena's eyes shimmered. Are you? Eli shook his head gently. I'm not asking for anything big. Not marriage. Not any promise you're not ready for. He took a breath. I'm just asking you to stay. To keep choosing us. To let this place be yours too. Lena turned the ring in her palm. Then, with quiet resolve, she slid it onto her right hand and smiled. I already chose you, she said. That night, after Ruby had fallen asleep under a mound of blankets and books, Lena stepped onto the porch and stared up at the stars. Eli joined her, leaning on the railing beside her. She fell asleep mid-sentence, he said, chuckling. Said it was the best birthday she ever had, even though it wasn't hers. Lena smiled, her voice soft. That sounds about right. They stood in a long, comfortable silence. Then she said, today felt like something shifted. Like something old just rewrote itself. Eli turned to her. What do you mean? She tilted her head up to the sky, her eyes catching starlight. For most of my life, I thought I came into this world broken. Like someone stamped defective on me the day I was born. She paused. But today felt like the start of something new. Like I finally showed up to my own life. Eli didn't answer. He just reached for her hand and gave it a squeeze. And in the stillness of the Montana night, wrapped in wood smoke, moonlight, and something sacred, Lena whispered into the dark. Not to him, but to the girl she used to be. You made it. The wind brought the smoke before the flames. By the time the sirens echoed through the valley, the ridge above Marlow burned orange against the deepening sky. A wildfire, fast, furious, fueled by dry brush and spring wind. Eli stood on the porch, cast finally off but still favoring one leg. Ruby clung to his side, eyes wide with fear. Lena stood a few steps ahead, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the glowing horizon. I know that look, Eli said quietly. She turned toward him. You need to pack. Grab what you can. Take Ruby to the church, they're setting it up for evacuees. You're coming too. No, she said, already lacing her boots. I know this ridge. I know those trails. They'll need someone to help guide folks out. Eli stepped forward, concern etched in every movement. Lena. She held his gaze without flinching. You told me I belong here. That this is my home. Eli froze, the weight of her words settling in his chest. Then let me be clear, she added. I protect what's mine now too. By the time Lena reached the fire line, the townspeople were already hard at work. Ranchers, teachers, shop owners, none of them firefighters, but all armed with whatever they could carry. Hoses, shovels, buckets, bare hands and full hearts. They weren't trained. They were just determined to protect what mattered. Lena stepped into the chaos without hesitation, voice strong and certain. Cut a break along that ridge. Clear that brush fast. Someone paused. Who put you in charge? She didn't miss a beat. Anyone else know this ridge better? Her eyes burned. Anyone else drag a man through 3 feet of snow right here last month? That shut him up. The others followed her lead. The fire spread with terrifying speed. One gust and it veered straight toward the rear edge of the Whitaker property where the fence line met the forest. Boomer was still out there. Lena didn't think. She bolted. The air was thick with smoke, every breath a challenge. Flames popped and hissed, embers whirling like vengeful sparks. The old barn groaned nearby, its roof caving. Behind the shed, she spotted Boomer trapped, barking in wild panic. "It's okay," she shouted, crouching low, wrapping her coat around his head, guiding him toward the open field. The fence was sagging, half-burned. Flames crept dangerously close. Then shouting. Eli's voice. "Lena." She spun around. He was limping toward her, face etched with panic. "I told you to leave," she yelled. He didn't slow down. "You think I could?" They met at the edge of the blaze, Boomer between them. And then the shed exploded. The propane tank went up in a roar of fire and shrapnel. The blast threw them both to the ground, a deafening silence ringing in its wake. When Lena came to, she saw Eli cradling Boomer's limp body. Blood streaked his cheek, but he was conscious. "You okay?" she gasped. "Ask me again later," he groaned. They dragged themselves into a ditch, burned, battered, coughing. But alive. Everything after that blurred. Sirens. Water spraying. Someone lifting them into the back of a truck. The church bell tolled at midnight, marking the end of the flames. By dawn, the fire was under control. 3 houses lost, but not a single life. Lena sat on the back steps of the church, bandaged arm resting in her lap, face streaked with soot. Evelyn joined her, handed over a steaming thermos. "You're a damn miracle, you know that?" Lena accepted the coffee. "I'm just stubborn." "Same thing," Evelyn said with a faint smile. Eli limped toward them. Ruby followed close, arms full of blankets and juice boxes for the other kids. He lowered himself onto the step beside Lena, not saying a word, just watching her. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out the ring. Lena stared at it. Before, Eli said quietly, "I told you I wasn't asking for anything." He paused. "But now I am." He turned toward her, voice steady. "I'm asking you to build a life with me, not because you owe me, but because I've seen you run into fire without blinking, and I don't want another day to pass without knowing I get to hold your hand when it's over." Lena didn't answer. She didn't need to. She simply reached out and took the ring. That evening, as the townsfolk gathered in the church hall to share food and comfort, Ruby climbed onto a chair. She cleared her throat, cheeks flushed with purpose. "Everyone says Lena's a miracle." A few chuckles drifted through the crowd. "I think she is too," Ruby said. "But maybe she was the prayer." She looked around. "And maybe we were the ones who needed answering." Silence fell. Then applause. Outside, the stars returned to the sky. The smoke lingered, but so did the light. Underneath the pines, in that gentle quiet, Eli pulled Lena close, kissed her forehead smudged with ash, and whispered, "You didn't just save me. You saved this whole town." Lena smiled softly. "Maybe," she said, "but you're the one who saw me first." Spring arrived in Marlow Ridge without fanfare. No announcement, no celebration, just snow melting slow and steady. Wildflowers uncurling on the hillside. The sun hanging on a little longer each evening. The scent of smoke no longer stirred fear. It stirred memory of what had been lost, what had been fought for, and what had begun again. At the top of the hill, the Whitaker cabin still looked the same. But it felt different. The roof had been patched, the porch swing reinforced, and above the door, Ruby's newest masterpiece hung proudly. A crooked wooden sign smeared with glitter glue. The Miracle House. It was uneven. It was perfect. Lena woke to birdsong and the soft weight of a quilt tucked around her shoulders. Somewhere in the house, Eli's boots creaked across the wooden floor. She smiled before she even opened her eyes. The weeks that followed had moved slowly, not from drag, but from care. Eli was healing. Ruby was thriving. And Lena was learning how to live. Not survive. Not float. Live. She helped mend fences, planted wildflowers beside Ruby, started drawing again, first shy sketches, then bold ones. Eli had cleared out a corner of the shed just for her. Your art spot, he'd said. Or your quiet place. Or just where you can breathe. She used it for all three. On the first Saturday in May, something simple and sacred happened. They got married. No guest list. No decorations. No aisle. Just the three of them stood barefoot in the field behind the cabin. The morning dew still clinging to the grass like a quiet blessing. Evelyn served as their witness. Ben read a scripture verse from a weathered piece of paper, the words steady and low. Ruby wore a crown of daisies and proudly announced that she was the flower girl, the ring bearer, and, in her words, the boss of snacks. Eli took Lena's hands gently in his and said, "You were never truly lost. You were just waiting for someone to really see you." Lena met his eyes, her voice steady and sure. "You didn't just find me, Eli. You gave me back to myself." And when their lips met, Ruby clapped so hard that her daisy crown slipped down over her eyes. They all burst out laughing. That laughter, pure, shared, and full of light, rose up into the spring sky like music only family can make. Later that evening, as the sun slid down behind the ridge, the little family gathered near the fire pit once again. Ruby was busy toasting marshmallows, her focus absolute. Eli leaned back in his chair, his arm resting easily across Lena's shoulders. Lena gazed into the fire, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the smooth edge of her wedding band. "You know," she said softly, "if you'd told me a year ago that I'd be here, I wouldn't have believed you." Eli smiled, that quiet, knowing smile of his. "I don't think you needed to believe it," he said. "You just needed someone else who did." She looked over at him, eyes glowing from the firelight. "I didn't know home could be this quiet, this safe. You're the one who made it that way," he told her. "You gave it breath again." Ruby climbed into Lena's lap with that effortless confidence only children carry. "Can we pray?" she asked. Eli and Lena shared a look. "Of course, sweetheart." They all bowed their heads. But this time there were no desperate wishes, no whispered hopes, no ache for something lost. Just Ruby's small voice, steady and full of peace. "Thank you." Then silence. Only the crackling of fire remained. And above them, the stars blinked quietly into view. Lena didn't move. She just sat there, one hand resting gently on Ruby's back. Her daughter. Yes, hers. She thought of all the places she'd passed through. All the nights spent trying to vanish into corners, into shadows, into silence. And now this. Not a mansion. Not a dream spun from fantasy. But a simple cabin with a creaky swing and a porch light that never stopped burning. She was no longer afraid. No longer unseen. No longer broken. She was a wife. A mother. A living, breathing miracle in motion. That night, just before bed, Lena stepped outside onto the porch one final time. The wind brushed gently past her. The hills stood still and quiet, like even the world itself had paused just long enough to notice how far she'd come. And in that quiet, without fear or longing, she whispered into the night. Not a wish, not a plea, just a truth softly spoken. "I am home."